Jet stuff that happened yesterday is not surprising to me. As I told you, changes were coming. It was just a matter of who was going to end up losing their job or parting ways with the organization. Notice how they parse those words. I don't think Rob Saleh really wanted to fire his friend. I just think that his friend probably took some of the pressure off of Rob Saleh and said, look, man, I could see the writing on the wall. I know what's going on out there. I can hear it. I see it. I can feel the pressure. Somebody has to end up move on. And this is the reality of their business. So now the question is, who do the Jets turn to? And at this point, I'm not really sure. And all I know is that I don't know if this is going to be a guy that they hire that does not have any connection to Rob Saleh. That would be like my buddy Frank Reich. I see Twitter. I know what people are saying. They'd love to see Frank. I don't know if Frank's even interested in this. He had a head coaching meeting yesterday with the Panthers. I think he's going to have a meeting lined up with the Houston Texans, and he may have a meeting lined up with the Denver Broncos. I'm not sure. But the point being is that, I know he wants to go through that process first. The thing about hiring an offensive coordinator that does not have a connection to Rob Saleh is that you automatically create a potential distrust between two people that are working together, and you're maybe your second or third most important hire in this case, your offensive coordinator. You'd like to know who he is. That's one of the reasons why these guys tend to hire a lot of friends and a lot of family, is because they don't trust anybody. It's just naturally inbred in all NFL teams, coaching staffs. Everybody's paranoid. Everybody's insecure. And now you got to go out and you got to find somebody. And hopefully Rob Saleh and Joe Douglas have somebody in mind together that they will hire and will not create any friction within the building or any potential distrust. And then find somebody who has a connection or maybe can build a connection with this young quarterback, it looks like, who they're going to be keeping. So none of this is shocking, but I do think that Mike LaFleur took the high road here. In other words, they didn't fire him. This is why it's the parting of the ways.
Well, the Jets took the high road, not Mike LaFleur.
Listen, I'm telling you.
He could have come out and trashed the Jets?
Not that. It's just that they could have come out and said, we are firing this guy. But they didn't do that.
Right. So the Jets took the high road.
Mutually agree. Right. I think he did too.
Yeah.
I think he.
Well, he doesn't want to sound like he got fired. I mean, for him, that's not.
Nobody does.
Yeah.
I could see him. Knowing what I know about him, I could see him going to the team and to Rob Saleh. Look, let me end all this nonsense. I don't want to be sitting here wondering whether or not you still want me. I know the fan base doesn't want me. And I don't want to put this kind of pressure on you, Rob. You're one of my best buddies.
Right, which adds another layer of this.
That's right.
Thing.
So I don't, I'll leave. You guys can fire me, whatever you want to call it. But let's just call it that we mutually agree. And Mike is believe me, he's got plenty of contacts in the NFL. His career will restart again next year somewhere else, maybe in Green Bay with his brother. Who knows? Maybe out with Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco. You never know. I mean, so he's going to be fine. But it's still, nonetheless, the day after, nobody ever wants to get fired. Nobody wants to be the reason why things don't work out. And I'll tell you, when I sit here and I kind of defend my buddy Frank and what happened to him in Indianapolis, I could say the same thing here about Mike LaFleur. I mean, they have 4 quarterbacks this year, 3 of them starting. It was a revolving door. They handled that the wrong way. And by the way, he's not the guy that handles that.
Right.
He's just the guy that is given the players, now go win a game. And you got 3 different quarterbacks, 4 if you count Strevel or that little half or that quarter against Jacksonville. But it's impossible to be able to be somewhat consistent when you have so many moving parts around you. And unfortunately, a really good guy and a good coach lost his job.
Yeah, what's interesting to me is what goes into this decision-making process, thinking into the future. So on one hand, and I heard some Jets fans are really both sides of this. This seemed like a 50-50 split from the reaction I was seeing yesterday. But I saw some Jets fans that were saying, all right, if you're going to keep Zach Wilson, and it sounds like that, now you're losing that continuity with him, and he's got to learn a whole new offense. It wasn't Mike LaFleur's fault. You're firing a guy, you're making him a scapegoat, and now you're going to make it tougher if you keep Zach Wilson. That's one side. The other side is, how could you keep this guy when, if you're keeping Zach Wilson, these are the results that you had with him? Now you're going to bring those 2 guys back again when there's been not just a long history. It hasn't been a long history, but it's been a history of complete and utter ineptitude with the 2 of them. So I kind of agree with the second part of it, meaning that you need to, because I don't know if Zach Wilson's going to work out. I have no idea. And I don't even know if he's going to be on the roster. They say he is, but we're going to go through this offseason. We're going to see opportunities for them to bring in players we didn't even think about. And we'll see who the Jets quarterback is. To me, it was about bringing in that veteran offensive guy that they have been missing since the tragedy of Greg Knapp.
Right.
That's what it was about. And in order to do that, you had to get rid of the offensive coordinator because you're not going to get anybody worth anything who's going to be Mike LaFleur's assistant. And if you bring in somebody like Frank Reich, you got to give him the title of assistant head coach. You do. Because he's not going to come here to be Mike LaFleur's replacement. Are you kidding me? He's got to come here and he's got to have major influence in that building, which puts pressure on Rob Saleh that could either go one way or the other.
Yeah, that's the other problem with this. So it's trying to put together people who may not know each other, if it were Frank or anybody else, but you're putting people together that may not know each other, never worked together. Maybe they might have a mutual respect for each other, which would be key. But there could be somebody else in that Kyle Shanahan tree that is out there that may just come in here, just be a different voice, a different way of seeing things, but they keep the same offense, keep the same, vocabulary, keep all of that together. Just somebody maybe a little bit older, a little bit better in terms of understanding how to get the best out of Zach and how to get the best out of the offense, and preparing Zach on a per game basis. And I don't really know who that person is, whether it be, was it Gary Kubiak or Clint Kubiak or whoever.
Darrell Bevell is a name that's out there. Nathaniel Hackett with his Broncos disaster is a name that's out there. By the way, I am not bringing him in because this guy that they hire has to be twofold. It has to not just be an offensive coordinator that gets the best out of Zach. It has to be someone who knows what the F they're doing.
Yes.
And the Jets don't have enough of those guys on this coaching staff, and it is played out that way right in front of our eyes.
All right. Well, I mean, that's, we'll go through the process with them. We'll figure out who all the candidates are. But I just know, it's never a great day when somebody, especially a close friend,
oh, it's got to be miserable in that building right now.
We've seen people get, let go around here and stuff like that. People that we've worked with for a long time. People that, you want them to be able to stay, but for whatever reason, they're not here. And it's the same thing for them. And they know it. They live a nomadic lifestyle, and they all know that it's a results-oriented business. I think Mike LaFleur said that last week. And so it's not shocking, I'm sure, to everybody over there in Florham Park. So now the question is, how do they turn this thing around? The other thing, too, is you got to hope that, next year they can come back and they'll have some sort of, they won't have the health issues that they had on offense. I mean, they had a ton of health issues on offense. You know that, and I know that. With the offensive line, like we're lauding Cincinnati going into their last, 3 games of the year, their offensive line had stayed intact from week 1 to, week 15. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden they lose their right tackle. Yeah. Now they lose, it's the right guard, I think. So the right side of the offensive line is now in a state of flux.
Yeah, but they've got a guy who can handle it because he handled it last year and took them all the way to the Super Bowl with one of the worst offensive lines in football. The Jets don't have that guy.
That's right, and he's getting rid of the ball in less than 2.5 seconds pretty much on everyone, and has learned how to play the game like Tom Brady plays the game. If it ain't open downfield and you haven't gotten rid of it, then just drop it off and let somebody else go make a play. But again, to go back to the Jets, they'll this will be really interesting to see who they hire. I would think that they're going to hire somebody in that space that somewhere along the line Rob Saleh has had a connection to, just because that's the normal thing to do, to hire somebody that, has had success somewhere else running the same type of offense and that Rob Saleh has a connection to. So there isn't that built-in distrust, especially if you hire, again, I don't know if this is going to happen, but if you hire a guy like Frank, you're right. He's not coming in, the amount of money he's making now, he's not coming in to take a $350,000 to $500,000 offense, whatever the minimum is for offensive coordinator, without having a significant level of influence. You know what I mean?
Of course. I mean, that's exactly why I said it. I mean, there's no way. Frank Reich isn't Mike LaFleur's replacement. And if he comes in, you got to give him the title, like I said, of assistant head coach, which creates other problems, but it's also something that maybe the Jets need. And I understand that Rob Saleh has to have a connection to the guy because we've seen stuff like that blow up in teams' faces before. Like
right here with the Jets.
The Jets with Greg Williams. I mean, and I know that, Adam Gase wasn't a great head coach. We understand that. But when you got a Shankopotamus over there and Greg Williams is ready to stab you in the back every single second, I mean, that's not a great environment to work in either. But I'm sorry I got to ask the question, but has Rob Saleh earned the right to be able to be that influential in this hiring process? Because it's not like he is someone that we're looking at as a pillar of stability with the Jets organization it is.
I will say this. I will predict this. They have another losing record next year. He will not be here.
Oh, of course not.
He will not be here. I mean, the futility when it comes to making the playoffs and having the longest route in the NFL when it comes to making the playoffs, there's going to be a lot of pressure on this group to get it right this year. A lot of pressure.
Yeah, I mean, and there's no doubt. And I think that Joe Douglas, too, depending on how this draft goes, but I think that that's going to be a conversation. I think I would keep Joe Douglas. I think he's made more good draft choices than not, and he's put this team in a position to succeed next year. But, yeah, of course. I mean, there's everything that we were talking about that was good about Rob Saleh when they were there at 7-4.
It's still there. It's all still there.
Right. It is all still there. But then all the bad things that we saw in the last year kind of came to roost. Now, there's reasons for that. But how many times have we talked about coaches who step up in those situations and then end up showing you why they're a good coach? I mean, I'll even though not a lot of people believe he's a great coach, but at the time when Dak Prescott went down, before even Cooper Rush played a game, you said this is where Mike McCarthy could show Jerry Jones that he is the guy.
Yes.
That's right there. How many times do we have to talk about Kyle Shanahan?
How about John Harbaugh?
Right, John Harbaugh, another one. Like these quarterbacks going down left and right. So there's examples of teams that keep it together when those injuries are there, and the Jets didn't even come close to keeping it together.
I would actually say that Lovie Smith, even though he's not the head coach at Houston anymore and he got fired, he decided like the last month of the season, let's do a little bit of alternating with the quarterbacks and let's see what happens.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be a brilliant move for them. They lost the number 1 overall draft pick, but they actually started moving the ball and started playing well and did different things with with Jeff Driscoll and with Davis Mills, and somehow they made it work. And they were scoring touchdowns. At least they were scoring touchdowns.
Well, that's right. That's another example. I mean, I'm not saying that the Jets need to be the Texans, but how many times you turn on an NFL game and you're seeing an offense be better than the Jets? The Jets had the worst offense, hands down, this year in the last month. Yeah, in the last month. It was actually the worst we'd seen in 20 years. That's how bad it was. So for those who are talking about, Mike LaFleur, and is he a scapegoat, everything else, I mean, there are statistics here and examples of just, the injuries aren't a good enough excuse. They're just not.
I don't know. I mean, when your quarterback's playing with 5 broken ribs and you keep him out there and then you put him back out there when he can't go out there initially, then you put him back out there against Seattle. Again,
they messed up with the quarterback position. We know that.
And again, I don't know. Should that have been, Joe Flacco? Should that have been Zach Taylor? I mean, Zach Wilson. I don't know. I just the bottom line is their quarterback situation is
it's a mess.
It is an absolute mess, and I could make an argument that it may be the worst in the NFL if, in fact, Zach Wilson can come back and do something. Then you got to think about, okay, now what is our quarterback room going to look like next year?
Yeah, and that's a question that I don't think anybody in that building even knows right now. I mean, they're talking a mean game about keeping Zach Wilson around, but we will see as the offseason goes on.
But if you keep Zach Wilson around, are you bringing Mike White back?
No, I told you yesterday that I would not. I would have another veteran quarterback for sure. I'd bring in somebody else, but I don't think you can if you're keeping Zach Wilson. If you're going to go in a different direction, I'd have Mike White as your backup for sure if Zach's not on the roster. But if you're committed to Zach Wilson, having Mike White around is just you just can't do it now with everything that went down.
So then the question is what veteran quarterback? Yeah. And depends on what a guy that you bring in here has got to be able to wrap his head around the fact that he is the backup player and the support player for Zach Wilson, and that the organization's got to say, look, and it's hard to do this with players because players want to play. I don't care what anybody says. a guy that, you would think it could make sense only if Zach Wilson is your unabashed starter as you get ready to start the season.
Yeah.
Would be a guy like Andy Dalton. If you can convince Andy that, look, you're the backup, you're the guy that's coming in here, and you're supporting Zach Wilson. Because Andy is not his personality is such that he's a team guy all the way. He's team first all the way. It's not about him playing. Now, he may think after some success that he had with New Orleans that he still can be a starting quarterback in this league. I don't necessarily know that is that the type of thing that you want in here. But then again, like I said, he's a low-key, easy to get along with, great guy that everybody really likes on their team. And maybe he's the guy that comes in and helps Zach Wilson transition to being the player that they think that they have.
This is the biggest question, and we have to take a break. The biggest question is, do Rob Saleh and Joe Douglas look at each other in this offseason and go, are we tying our wagons, our careers, our jobs, our livelihoods to that kid? Yes or no?
That's a very good question.